This is Eating Crow with Pete Durand. Hello again. Welcome to another episode of the Eating Crow podcast. I have my good friend Jimmy Miller up in Charlottesville, Virginia, one of my most favorite places in the world to live. How you doing, Jimmy?
I'm doing great today, Pete. Thanks, man.
Well, and we'll get to you. We're going to let you introduce your wonderful background. But in doing some research, Jimmy, I uncovered some data that I think I knew it, but I didn't really understand it. So Jimmy's a really good basketball player. And in 1984, you were the MVP of the East Regional Final while you were at Virginia. I think I knew you had a really good tournament, but I forgot you were the MVP.
Now you and my mother, or and myself, we're the only three people that remember that.
And we're probably the only people you can talk about it in front of, right? 84 is a long time ago.
That's right. That's right.
So I did some research and recognized you beat Indiana 50-48.
Yeah.
And you had 19 points in that game.
Yeah.
You outscored Steve Alford, who only had 6.
They didn't get the ball to me enough. I could have had 24 in that game.
You could have been. You were raining it down.
I was on. I was in the proverbial zone.
And by the way, in only 29 minutes.
Oh, well, yeah.
29 minutes you had that prolific scoring output. And by the way, you just completely shut down and outscored the one and only great Dan Dakich.
Yeah, that's right. I see Dan now from time to time doing the color on the radio for the Virginia men's basketball games. I've been doing that for the last 3 years. So when we're playing a national TV game where Dan is doing that, and he reminds me of that every time. He sees me walking in and he starts shaking his head, and then he brings up another guy named Kent Needland who stole the ball from him late in the game, and he's like, I still get shivers over that.
It's funny how for me it's certainly not at a college level, but in high school I still wake up having bad sports final nightmares of for me it was the finals in the 1600 meter relay in high school. I tripped coming out of turn 2 at the baton change, and I was not fast enough to recover after that, Jimmy. It was over for me.
Who is?
Yeah.
I mean, who is?
Well, there are people that are. I don't have that gear, right? I either get it and start running really fast and hope I finish. I didn't have the, oh yeah, no problem, that comeback video. No, that's not me. So, we'll tap into more of your basketball background, and my sons are both Division I athletes, and I think the impact college athletics has on somebody's disposition, drive, ability to perform is such a big deal. But so you're running and you founded a group called Miller Financial, Jimmy. Kind of tell us about that and what drove you to start the firm.
Yeah, so we're a small financial planning and asset management company based in Charlottesville, Virginia. We've got clients all over the country. Mm-hmm. We work with a lot of business owners, senior level executives, retired folks, and young professionals. I clump athletes in there. Mm-hmm. And we basically help them manage their money in the most cost efficient and tax efficient manner possible while managing risk. And yeah.
What was your undergrad, Jimmy, at UVA?
Yeah, I was a psychology major. So I use that every day, Pete. I'm not going to kid you. I didn't come into this industry with knowing exactly how, that I was going to do this, but as you alluded to, we started Miller Financial 10 years ago. So we just experienced our 10-year anniversary right at the end of August. And before that, I did my training in New York in the World Trade Center with Morgan Stanley. And they had a small office here in Charlottesville. And I came back and started, because I went to school in this town, this would be a good place to perhaps try to start that business. And, I was there for a couple of years, transitioned to Bank of America, and was there probably for 10 years. 8, 9, 10 years, and learned a lot there. And if you go back to 2008, 9, when the financial services industry was getting turned upside down. And, I'd met a lot of neat people along the way. And for better or worse, the brand of Bank of America drove a lot of business our way. And to the point where we were really just reacting. We were larger and growing and all that stuff. But to me, this is a relationship business. And each year I felt like I was having to react more and more while grow our business, because I had management behind me saying, hey, you need to increase revenue 20% year over year, et cetera. So it was, and then the financial industry got turned upside down. There was a lot of consolidation that was taking place. And we had some choices. We could have stayed where we were. We could have gone across the street, as I like to say, to, Wells Fargo and Wachovia were joining forces. And then there was that third element of, what would going out on our own look like if we tried to do this? And frankly, that was the scariest.
Yeah.
I had two kids, small kids at the time. But I tell you what, it's you never know what a conversation that you have with anybody, what that does. And I had one of my good friends who was a client, successful business owner up in Northern Virginia in the DC area. And he said to me one day, he said, Jim, when are you going to go do this on your own? And I said, wow, I don't know. But it planted the seed. And as you know me, or people who know me, I'm very methodical. I'm very deliberate. I don't make quick emotional decisions, but that resonated with me, because I had two small kids, and I wanted to be there, very involved in their childhood, something that I didn't have. My mother and father divorced when I was 8 years old, and my mother basically raised me and my sister, living paycheck to paycheck. And so, I knew I didn't want that for my family. And so I wanted, how could I have the most control? Ultimately, at the end of the day, it was like, okay, this is the biggest risk, but let's go do this. And Pete, this, I love hearing others share their experiences as it relates to this. What's to me, the reason why people don't go and do something else is the fear of failure.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm like, I failed before. And, what's the risk here is that none of my clients come with me. I hang out my own shingle and nobody comes with me. And I told my wife, I said, listen, if that happens, at least I gave it a shot, and I can go back and get a job somewhere doing something, working for somebody.
Yep.
But the greatest upside was going to be taking this risk, not looking back 10 years from now, or from then, really looking back and saying, gosh, I wonder what if. I wonder what would happen if I did find the courage to take that leap. And now here we are 10 years later, and we're doing all right. And and so it's fulfilling. Now we got different challenges and all, but I look back and feel good about the fact that I had found the courage to take the risk back then.
Well, it's interesting because when you identified, and you did, your own personality traits, right? You're a methodical, in general, non-risk-taking kind of guy, right? So when you identify the risk and the fear and you overcome it, that's an even bigger deal. I'm wired to take risk. That's just kind of how I am, and it's stupid. It's been stupid sometimes, but I kind of run towards that. So when I think about someone sitting down and doing the math and making the calculations, and I had 3 kids going into high school when I started my first business, and I sold our house, took all of our college return, all of our college funds, all of our retirement, I threw it all in. And as a financial guy, you're going, oh, that makes me sick to my stomach, right? So I wouldn't recommend that for most people. My wife is a superhero because she went along for the ride and has been there through the whole thing. But I look back at those 10 years as you are now, and they were the most rich years of my life.
Yes.
I was home I traveled excessively before then for work.
Yeah.
And my kids were little, so I missed some things. I didn't miss the big things. But for these past 10 or 15 years, when my kids were in the middle of sports and everything else, I was there for all of those events, every one of them. And sometimes I was on my old pager or BlackBerry at the time. And other times I was on my smartphone, but I was always there. So you're right. You won't have any regrets. Fear has killed more dreams than any reality will, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
When you got that first inspiration from the client, first of all, is that person a client today?
Yes.
Bingo. What was the first thing you thought of when you sat down and you did your methodical approach? You wrote it down. If I start this, what's the first thing I need to be successful?
I think you need, for me, it was a critical one individual, so when we started, it was me, and I had to convince this young lady who supported me back at Bank of America at the time, me and 3 other advisors. But she's a rock star, man, and she was smart, and like she got it, and she's great with people. I need her on my team. So that like looking back, there were things that I was doing. I had to, realizing, in our industry, you can't pre-solicit. I can't call you up, Pete, and say, hey, I'm thinking I'm going to leave and start this on my own. I just want to let you know before I do it. I'm not allowed to do that. And so we left squeaky clean. And so I knew, okay, this is going to take some time to start generating any kind of revenue on the other side. So, like what you said about Julie, your wife, but, my wife is a rock star, and she supported me to go find the courage to do this. We started raising, cash, piling up cash, knowing that there are going to be a lot of expenses in the first 6 months and maybe very little revenue. And so, and with 2 small kids, I admire hearing you just, the ability for you to just go and like seize that. I mean, I really do. That's pretty cool. And probably to a fault, I'm more methodical on the other end. So I'm trying to get more like you.
You have your hair. I don't. So I would go with your model.
Yeah, but it is grayer now through all this stuff.
It is.
But people, so I needed this young lady to come with me. And then of course, we raised, we had cash sitting there to get us through whatever window of time it was going to be. And then it was getting out there and telling our story, telling it with our clients and being true and authentic and sincere, which is still, one of our, that's true today. That you can't fake that, I don't think. And
so you can't, and you just touched on something that, whether you know it or not, is incredibly powerful. So you guys sell, your product is a service. We're struggling with it, and I work in a digital marketing agency as chief revenue officer, and we're constantly struggling to get our people to understand what our story is. It's the first thing you said, and you said it with 100% authenticity, and you meant it, is had to get out there and tell our story and be authentic. People don't necessarily, and I'll say what you do is a considered purchase. They're going to do some research. or they're going to think about this a lot before they trust you with their finances. I can't think of a lot of bigger things that you have to go and do some research. And they're doing research on you, Jimmy, right? And the people that you hire and that you put around you, because the level of trust around this is astonishing. So that story, let's touch on that for a minute. If I was to say to you, Jimmy, I want to give you the money that by the way, I don't have, because I'm still a struggling entrepreneur. What's the story you're telling me that makes me feel comfortable you understand what my concerns are as well as my goals?
You can't speed up one's perception of you. So you have to, understand where somebody is coming to you from. And the case for me, Pete, when I first got into this industry, even to where we are today, it's less of a factor really today, because now we've got a track record. We've got a long runway of doing what we do. But people knew me from my basketball career, and then I got into this business, and it's a very emotional business, and particularly when you're talking about people's finances and money. And so they're like, you get started in the business and you're calling all your friends and family, right? And so my family had no money. So that list was short and done. And now I'm calling friends and and then acquaintances, right? And
yeah.
So people knew me as a former basketball player. What do you know about managing money? And so you paint your story, and really you're looking for a chance. And so what they would do is they'd give you a bone. I call it, giving you a bone. And so they give you a little bit, and early on in your career, you're gathering all these bones from people. And it was very transaction oriented. It was driven by performance, and I learned early on, man, this is, if you're only as good as your return last year, you're going to lose at some point.
Yeah.
I learned early on that we needed to change that philosophy and the way we did it. And it's going to take longer to make money doing what we do, but it's the right way to do what we do. I really believe that. So once we learned how to change the way we would approach our process, and it's now centered from a beginning with financial planning perspective, and sitting down and say, hey, what keeps you awake at night? Tell me more about what is important to you, and then listen, right? I mean, and I can talk more about that, but the if you listen, then people will tell you what they're concerned about, what keeps them awake, what are their goals. And then we became problem solvers, and we would go out and try to solve for that. So we're not set, right? We haven't sold a product.
Right.
We're helping solve what's important to you and your family. And then that takes time. You can't, that experience is through communication, how you interact with your clients, building trust, and you can't speed up that process. And fortunately, we have experiences that sway us in how we make decisions, and having mentors in any industry that can help guide you and navigate you through trying to do more good than wrong decisions, perhaps. So we learned that, I learned that early on, and I once I started taking that approach, then it's the turtle, it's slow and steady, and I'm really proud of what we've done in this 10-year period now, but that doesn't come overnight.
When you think about the time you got out of college and you decided to get into the financial world, was there a moment in your personal life or your work life where you thought, I've got to do something complete? You went to school for something completely different than you're doing right now. You've leveraged it. You use it. It's a big part of the problem you just described, right? Which is building trust and establishing relationships. What was the time in your life that said, geez, I think that's something I need to go do. I need to rethink where my career is headed. What was that? Describe that.
That was a very difficult time, personally. I looking back, Pete, I wish somebody had told me, hey, go through the McIntire School of Commerce at the University of Virginia. That, like, how great of a educational base that would be. But I didn't. So I was a psychology major, and I had aspirations of playing professional basketball after college. And so that was like right in front of me. That was what I was focused on, and ended up playing for 4 years after college. And then that was coming to an end. It's like, okay, what do I do now? To kind of your question, my whole self-worth, my identity has been centered around this basketball my whole life. And so I must get into coaching. And so what do former players do? They get into coaching. And so I coached for 2 years. And I realized then that okay, if I want to be an assistant coach on a top 50 program, well, there are 1,000 guys like me, and it's being in the right place at the right time, whatever, or it's going to be me going from Ashland, Virginia, as a Division III coaching at Randolph-Macon College, to then going to Bowling Green, Ohio, to going and at that point, Pete, it was a really tough decision for me personally. And that was when I decided to walk away and try to go and figure out that next step. And so I didn't come right into this industry that we know, but I've always had an interest in it. Okay. I remember I grew up divorced family, not having any means. And I saw my friends around me having the Walkman, if you're, Walkman, and I'm like, man, that would be cool if I could get one. So I learned at an early age that I was a saver. So it wasn't about how much I had, but I just, it's a rule that we still try to apply today: pay yourself first. And so I learned those kind of basic principles early on. And so I always had an interest in it. And that's eventually how I gravitated to this industry, because I'd met a lot of people over my life up to that point with great life experiences and life stories, and had the opportunity to travel all over the world. And I'm like, okay, how can I even begin to give myself the chance or the opportunity to experience what I've seen of so many others around me? So that was part of the motivation of getting into an industry that I had great interest in, although didn't have the formal background or education to get into it.
Many people don't know this, and it's not on your LinkedIn profile, but you happen to be a pretty phenomenal magician. So
that's a good segue right there.
it is, and it's because when I think back when I first met you, and you have, by the way, for someone who's so successful, you have a tremendously natural sense of humility. Which is why people want to be around you. You're a caring and thoughtful and funny and really gregarious guy, but you just bring a kind of really interesting sense of humility. You have, when people are around you, you seem to subconsciously try to lift them up, which is really a neat thing. When I've watched you perform magic tricks, I always felt like, geez, Jimmy, I don't want to ask you to do another one because you feel like I'm getting bored of doing this. But when you do it, your face kind of lit up, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
to be a successful Division I, professional basketball player means the reps have to be there, right? You had to put in the time and do the grind. And I don't know how many people who haven't done that or parented a kid who've gone through this process. It's relentless. And that's why kids out of school who've played a Division I sport, if it's between that kid and another kid who hasn't, they might both be equally educated and as intelligent. The kid who's been the athlete typically gets the nod because there's no question if they can do the grind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're going to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and be here and they're going to work.
That's right.
Magic is the same level of repetition. You have to practice those tricks over and over and over again. When did you start doing that?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, that was I gravitated to magic early on as a young person, and it was probably 12 years old when I first got my first TV magic set by a guy by the name of Marshall Brodeen out of Palatine, Illinois, I believe it was, and he advertised this thing on TV, and I'm like, I just was fascinated by it, so I got that, and that was my first introduction, and then I saw a couple magicians in person who like, wow, that's really cool, and so I started early on learning different tricks and talking and meeting with other magicians, and it kind of snowballed. So by the time I was in high school, I'll never forget this. My high school basketball coach was livid that the day of the regional championship, I had a magic show at the local community library that morning, and then we're playing that night. And of course, we're traveling to another part of the state, and he found that out, and he was just like livid. But I learned, I started performing when I was in high school, and I did my first show in 10th grade at a church for a church organization. And Pete, man, I've just stayed with it. It was in many ways, it was a way for me to get out of all the other noise and stuff that was happening around me at that time. And some of that stuff was happening really fast. And so this was a way for me to go into my room and just pick up a deck of cards or coins and start evolving. And then I enjoyed the performing aspect of it. It's hard to describe, when you get up in front of somebody and they respond in a positive manner, like, oh, that felt good. I'd like to do that again. And the psychology now comes into play because I fast forward many years later when I've studied this now at great lengths, when you do something and you mess up, and it gets a certain reaction. Mm-hmm. I would go back and analyze the pros and cons, the good and the bad of when I did a show. I'd have these cue sheets, I called them, and all the things that worked, didn't work, the routine, the sequencing of different tricks, and what I opened with, what I closed with. And, I dropped that egg in the middle of that show, and it cracked on the floor. And it got a huge reaction. And so I was able to recover and go on and do this ending. But I made note of that. I'm like, every time I do that trick now in a show moving forward, I'm going to drop the egg and react to, oh no, whatever. And anyway, that's the psychology that kind of came into play, trying to understand, again, reading people and what works, what doesn't work, and trial and error and all that stuff. But magic has been a wonderful hobby, and in some way, I get paid to go and perform now. And I've done that all over the country, and so it's a neat what started off as a hobby and a passion, we can talk about passion for forever. It has evolved into something that's allowed me to get in some pretty neat doors.
So you're still doing it?
I am not as much now because I've got some greater demands on, you talked about putting in the reps. There's so much new material out there, and I see new stuff, and I want to learn that, some of that stuff, but you got to put in the reps. And, so I'm short answer is yes. And I'm eagerly excited about learning new material as well.
There's some interesting attributes that come to mind when I think about combining your financial wherewithal, your athletic performance as a basketball player, and your ability to learn and perfect and continue to practice magic. Your brain has to work in a certain way, right? You have to be. Magic is a lot like math, and it's a lot like finance. There's combinations of things and movements that you have to repeat over and over again, and there's some precision to it. But for leaders and entrepreneurs that are listening to this program, the next thing I want to lean into is this next phase of Miller Financial. And I've had a couple different entrepreneurs in the program who've built their own firms, just like you. And they're at this point now where they either expand and grow, or to your point earlier, you continue on the path that you're on. And I'll touch on that in a minute. But if you're an entrepreneur and you're listening to this, you need to apply the discipline that Jimmy's described here between all aspects of his life. You went to New York for 10 years and learned the finance business, and came back to Charlottesville and learned it again for another 7 years. So by the time you went on your own, like you said, you had some credibility. You were able to point to the fact that you knew what you were talking about. And that took time. I think the word used was bones. People were throwing you bones. You were gathering bones. In your magic business, it's the first time I've heard you use the word passion, right? This was a thing that allowed you to escape, and you became passionate about it. And in basketball, for you, I think there's this inherent competitive drive in you. I have a lot of friends that are in the finance world who were former athletes. And I've asked them why, and they said, I don't think they realized at the time, but as an athlete, you're measured in wins and losses, right? There's a scorecard for everything you do. In finance, there's nowhere to hide. There's no question of whether or not it's working or performing. It's there in black and white, right? And some people respond well to that. Some people don't. They just don't. So, when we were talking before we started recording, help us understand this point where you're now in your organization, where certainly you've got credibility, you've got people that want to work with you, so you have opportunities to expand your firm. What's the thought process, Jimmy, in that, you've built a lifestyle business, right? You could do this comfortably for the rest of your life and make a living and build your practice and surround yourself with a small group of people. Or you can welcome people with a like-minded mindset and culture and continue to grow. And there's a lot of satisfaction in that. So what's that decision process like for you?
Well, it's taken us 10 years to kind of get to where we are in that position right now. We've entertained the thought of what growing would look like. Internally, we always called it like smart growth. So there's some benefit from growing, allows us greater scalability to do certain things. And so that's important, but we, being in the seat that I'm in, we get to control that. We get to control how fast or how slow. And we talked about it a little bit earlier. I think it's really important, though, is getting the right people on the bus, and the culture is so important. That's number one for me, really. We've got if you were physically in our office, we've got stenciled up on the wall in our lobby area of it's the pillar of unity. And there's an old African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right? And when I first heard that, that just so resonated with me and on so many levels. And for any of us, Muhammad Ali had greatness, right? He could do it by himself. Michael Jordan, and then was great. But for the rest of us, I really believe to touch any level of greatness, we need to do it in concert with others, and getting those people that are like-minded, philosophically aligned, morally, ethically, and that's when you find that, that's really special. I'll share this with you because I think this is profound. When I first heard Tony Bennett, the head men's basketball coach at Virginia, reference this, when he, we won a national championship, a year and a half ago now. Last season was cut short because of COVID, but he's been at Virginia for 12 years now or something. And early on in his career here at Virginia, he talked about the type of players that he was recruiting. He needed to get a group of guys together that could learn to lose together before we could learn to win together. I thought, man, that's to the core, right? Because if you can, experience adversity, and it's easy when things are going great. But you and I both know that it's not always going to be the case. And so when you experience adversity, the team that you have around you, the ability to be able to manage through that together, I think is huge. So we're at that stage now where we're trying to go to the next level, and it starts by getting the right people to be a part of our ecosystem, and that's fun. At the end of the day, right? Why are we doing it? And all that, our job is intellectually stimulating. We work on some really interesting cases with folks, but it's fun trying to build something in what we're doing and helping people. And that's always been kind of a core fiber in my DNA. It's what's made me tick. We said it before, this is a relationship business. And I can't explain the gratification that comes when we help either an individual or a family, get from point A to point B.
A couple interesting things there. So your mission obviously is to help, and to do that. And I know you personally, that your mentality is to put others first, right? You're there to serve your team. You're there to then serve your customers. You mentioned Tony Bennett, who I'm glad you brought up. Tony's one of my childhood heroes. This is a funny story. You'll appreciate this. So when Julie and I got married, we were living in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. Tony was a senior at UWGB under his dad,
Yeah.
Tony Senior. And yeah. Dick was coaching up there. So the funny thing is, when I had hair, I was Tony Bennett's doppelganger. I'm not exaggerating. I'd go to meet Julie. She was a teacher, and I'd walk into school, and the kids went up and say, "Tony's here." They thought I was Tony Bennett. It was hilarious. Now we don't look anything alike because Tony retained his hair. But there's another story about Tony that, dovetails into this discussion. I heard that when, he was winning, things started to happen. He's winning the national championship. He was offered a tremendous upgrade to his contract. And Tony said, "I'd like you to give it to the strength coach and the assistant coaches and the people that run the building here and take it. I don't need any more money."
Yeah.
Have you heard another person in professional sports or collegiate sports ever say that before? You touched upon a couple of things there that I think really, separates Tony from so many other people in this profession of college coaching, but across the board in whatever industry we're in. He's got in his program, he's got the 5 pillars, and you touched upon one there, the pillar of servanthood. Yeah. And the way to true greatness is through serving others, whether it's your teammates, your classmates, your coaches, your professors, your community, right? And for him, those 5 pillars are non-negotiable. And
back when we played in the early 80s, we had at Virginia, we had a really good teams, and the opportunity to play with Ralph Sampson put us at an elite level. And we practiced some of those same principles, those same pillars, but we didn't call them maybe what Tony calls them. So fast forward now 35 years or whatever, and I've had the opportunity to get up close to this team and see those in action and up close. And it is like it reminded me, those were things that were true to me. I won't go into each of them, but I'm happy to. Humility, passion, servanthood, unity, thankfulness. Those are the 5 pillars. And we used to talk about humility, and only believe half of what you read. And you're never as good as they say you are, and you're never as bad as they say you are. So you have to have some confidence though too, but do it with humility. Passion, don't be lukewarm. Everything I've known about you, Pete, everything you've done from day one, I connect you with passion. I heard a guy say once that if you light yourself on fire with passion, people will come from miles away to watch you burn. I love that, right?
That's a great quote.
Love that. And of course, we just talked about servanthood, the pillar of unity, being together, teamwork, not doing it alone on an island. And the last pillar is the pillar of thankfulness, right? Wherever we are in our lives at different times, to be able to take a step back and be grateful and thankful for what you have, knowing that there are others who would gladly have your problems, and that helps put everything in perspective, I think. And so we've adopted those for our firm, our company here, because they've always resonated with me in some shape or form. And Tony, those are non-negotiables for his program, and they live by those pillars every single day.
Well, you know what? In that single decision, and by the way, he didn't announce that. No, he never told anyone publicly that he made that decision. That came out from somewhere in the organization and said, you realize what this guy just did? So if you think about the 5 pillars, in that one single decision, all 5 pillars are represented. So he said, look, I have more than I need. I'm thankful. I'm very, very thankful. By making the decision to share that with the rest of the organization, the unity that comes from that, right? Now everybody is on board with Tony's mission. And that's demonstrated by servitude, right? His servanthood right there is, I'm going to put others before me. That is also displayed. And the fact that he didn't tell anybody about it is so, that's the humility part of Tony. He's not looking for those accolades. Dick was the same way, right? I mean, one of the reasons that people from Wisconsin, where I'm from, are huge Tony Bennett and Dick Bennett fans are because of the way they conduct themselves like this on and off the court. And then the last one is passion. You watch Tony coach, the guy's got passion.
Oh, yeah.
In every aspect. And when he went to Charlottesville, when he went to UVA, I looked at my wife, because we used to live in Charlottesville. That's how we met. I said, I can't think of a more perfect place for him to be. And I would not be surprised if he stays there the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can have such an impact in a community if you approach it with humility. If you approach it with, this is a stepping stone for me to make more money and go to the pros, Tony could have professional coaching contracts all day long.
That's right.
But that's not what he's about. So, and now I've got Tony down as one of my next guests in the podcast. That's one of my next stretches, just to get him to share that. But
that's great.
I want to wrap up this with a couple comments you talked about as you're thinking about expanding your firm. You want to build this ecosystem, is how you described it, in culture, ethics, moral values. And you described the fact that you've had opportunities to grow or merge with other third parties over the past 10 years, but it didn't feel right. And you're in a situation now where you've got some opportunities with people you start to think you're thinking align more with what you're trying to do as a vision, as a business, which can be fun and exciting. You've participated in teams all your life. Now you're building another team. So I wish you nothing but the best, and I see bright futures for you and Miller Financial.
Well, we were talking, and I'd like to add this, here as we wrap up, I guess, when I look back at what maybe we didn't do so well, all right, and
Interesting.
things that we could improve on, and there are two things in our conversation that kind of jump to mind. One would be on the employee side, so the people that we are hiring. There was be slow to hire, quick to fire, and we probably went down that path, and one of the challenges probably was keeping somebody around too long, and then the second one, which I think is really important in day to day what we do, and we talked about listening, and we would prepare for client meetings by coming in with an agenda, and here are the things we want to talk about, and it could be what's new in your world, let me tell you about the market, what's going on in the market, and here's the performance, right? And if we had good performance, perhaps like the meeting went how we thought it would go, like, oh, that was a good meeting, and then we realize there's some point in time where here's what we want to talk about, but take a step back and say, like, Pete, in preparation for our meeting next Wednesday, we got some things we want to talk about, but let's make sure we talk about what you want to talk about. And if you got those in advance, send those to us so we're prepared to talk about it. And so we had real life client, husband and wife, and we did what we described in the way we did it, the agenda, the markets, and all that stuff. And then we tried it differently, and we said, Miss Smith, what do you want to make sure we talk about? And she said, I want to make sure that my disabled daughter is taken care of for the rest of her life. Wow, we never even asked the question, and so, like, it didn't even matter what the performance was or what's happening in the market, the trade war with China or name it, right? That's what kept her awake at night.
Yeah. Last quarter's financials don't really matter in that environment.
So once that was a light bulb. That was one of those aha moments. And so, being good listeners, we can learn a lot in that situation.
It's funny. People by the way, in a sales oriented business, you have to wake up and acquire customers every day. Every business needs to, or you just start to die. So every meeting with a customer, if you approach it that you're there to serve them and meet their needs, it flips the whole dynamic around.
I think so.
When I had my fitness business, one of my salespeople who I really liked and respected, we were on a call, and unfortunately, it was with BP, so British Petroleum. It could have been one of the largest. It could have changed the nature of our entire company. And it was his account. He got in. So I typically always do this. I let my team run the process. I'm not, hey, I got to come in and do the presentation. I'm the guy, and I probably knew it better than anybody, and probably in this case should have done it. But it was a virtual call, 10 years ago. So it was just a telephone conference. We had up the slide deck, and we were talking through it. At this point in time, you couldn't see people's faces. That's very hard to read an audience. He was not going to get through that slide deck.
Yeah.
And he rolled right over her. And I knew it was happening. I could tell she wanted to ask a question. I could tell she had heard it all before, and I knew we were tanking. But he had to get through it. And in fact, he did it. He presented angrily. Like, you need to understand this. If you're not, you're stupid. Right. So we happened to be in the same town. We hung up the phone. I said, we'll just say Bill. Bill, let's go have lunch. And we sat down and I said, what do you think just happened there? He didn't understand it. I said, your job is not to get through the slide deck. Your job is to ask her 3 or 4 questions up front to understand her needs and adjust our conversation to address those needs. And by the way, to your point, I like how you guys do this ahead of time. What are your expectations? Because for you guys, there's got to be some research and some planning and some structure to that. You can't come in blind. In our business, in that presentation, we can adapt our content on the fly to do that. That's part of what we should be able to do. But there may be situations where she says something or brings something up that we can't adjust on the fly. It's perfectly okay to say, Joan, that's a great question. Let me see if I understand that correctly, and I'll get back to you tomorrow with a response.
Yep.
So the listening aspect, I think, by the way, that's a salient moment, right? I need to make sure that my disabled daughter is taking care of the rest of her life. That's a financial goal.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Jamie, that's a great way to close this this episode, because we're always looking for something when people are listening, they walk away and go, oh man, I don't know if I'm doing that. I don't know if we're listening to our customers from that standpoint. And I've had conversations where someone's explained to me what they're looking for, and I've had to say to them, that's wonderful. We don't provide that, but I know someone that does. 5 years down the road, that's a customer, because they're eventually going to need what you offer.
You got it. Yeah.
Oh, Jimmy, we could go for another hour.
We could, man. I got to say, I mean, you got the cap on, like, the hair thing, I'll give that to you, but you look the same all these years from when you go back to when we first met, however long ago that was. So you look great. It's
been, 21 years? Jimmy?
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
God, that's a long time. It's been great catching up. I look forward to hearing how you guys have evolved the business next time we catch up, and if you've made those pivotal moves, right?
Yeah.
They're a little bit scary, but you've got a sound base to build off of. So I wish you nothing but the best, and thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for allowing me to participate. Really good.
It was great. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Jimmy.
All right, buddy.
Thanks for checking out Eating Crow. Like and subscribe so you never miss a video.